10 years, just so you know.
I only watched it last night because it was like.
What did you watch, Dave? Tell us. What did you watch?
I watched Rope from 1948.
Wow. Whoa.
On at 11:30 on a Tuesday night. No, I bought this Alfred Hitchcock collection because obviously none of his films are streaming really, like for free.
Mm-hmm.
I presume just because no one wants to pay for them, and at the same time, I don't imagine they're like a what's the word I'm looking for? Like something that would sell a streaming service, really, which is bizarre because absolutely I'd be like, oh my god, you've got all 50 Alfred Hitchcock films, fantastic! Here's a $5 a month for the 6 weeks it takes me to watch all of those. But like. So anyway, I bought this box set of 14 like completely arbitrary Hitchcock films. I think we've already discussed this. That like North by Northwest isn't in there. Strangers on a Train, Dial M for Murder. None of those are in there. It's just an odd selection.
Well,
anyway,
it's the cheap ones, isn't it? It's the cheap ones.
It's the cheap ones and the big ones. So Vertigo, Rear Window, and Psycho are all on there.
And then the rest is padding.
Yeah, totally. There's a lot of them I've never ever heard of. And I'm a film nerd. Anyway. So as I'm like diving back into the realms of physical media, which is it's a heady rush of this is why I don't miss physical media, right? So I only have my Xbox is the only thing that will play a DVD. There's no disc drive on my laptop. So that's it. So my Xbox
what?
The confusing thing. So I went to put the disc in and there was already a disc in my Xbox. I think it was Fargo. So then I had to try and find the Fargo box, and I couldn't.
If it's been in your Xbox for presumably, like 5 years already, who gives a fuck?
Oh no, this is the irritating thing, Sam. Is that follow me here? So I tried to find the box Fargo and couldn't find it. So I thought, oh well, what else have I got? There was already a disc face up on top of the Xbox, which was Thief. So I found the box for Thief, and in Thief was the disc for Casino. So then I had to find the box for Casino, and in the box for Casino was one of the DVDs from the Goodnight Sweetheart box set. I have no idea what that is. So now I'm at a point where I was like, so now I've got Fargo I can't find the box for, and I can't find this TV series box set. So I was like,
you're giving me haunting flashbacks to like 2011.
This could have gone on for hours, honestly, because I've only got like a stack of 10 or 15 DVDs that I've bought largely because they aren't streaming. Like usually it's Casino because you just can't stream it. So like this could have gone. Can you imagine like 10 years ago, Sam? This would have been like a 4-hour trip of me like every single DVD would be in the next box from the next thing I watched.
Yeah, because you're slovenly and disorganized.
You make that sound like I'm unduly slovenly for putting a disc in the nearest box to hand rather than finding the one.
Yeah, but these are the thing. This is the downfall of civilization. Is what this is. We have become so unable to even carry out the most basic of tasks like organization. Because of Netflix, we now just press buttons like those fucking floating, the people on the floating chairs in WALL-E. That's what we've become because of DVD sales falling away. This is the problem.
Possibly, I would argue.
No, definitely.
I'd argue I've always been this slovenly. I was bad like this with video games when they used to be physical media. You should see the piles of books just around my room.
I believe
it's becoming quite a problem. But this is not new. This is fairly par for the course. Anyway, and then after all of this diatribes, this was 14 hours of my day trying to fucking track down DVD boxes. I then decided to watch Rope because in this box set, given that it was 11:30 at night, it was now 4:00 in the morning by the time I found all these DVD boxes. Rope is only 80 minutes long, so I was like, absolutely cracking. This is a fantastic idea. That takes me to like 10 to 1, totally reasonable time to go to bed when you work for yourself. And as discussed in the past, some of my favorite time of day is like that 12 to 2 period. I don't mean like when you're out drinking. I mean when you're stone cold sober. That's like a nice, peaceful, relaxing time of day.
Oh, the evenings are the best time because it's your time. And, for the best time, drink evening times. That's exactly what you need.
Drink evening times. That's 12 till 2.
Absolutely butchered that.
We should have a nighttime radio show.
Welcome brilliant.
To the evening.
Yeah, right in there. Hi, and welcome to The Late Drive with Sam and Dave. Today we're going to be talking about 1940. No jingles. No jingles. It's The Late Drive, Dave. Today we're going to talk about 1948's Rope and exploring some of the interesting scene transitions that we get from this Alfred Hitchcock classic.
This is a movie you've been fucking going on and on and on and on about for like it's not that long, but it feels like about a decade. Yeah, but really, it's been it came up about 3 months ago, and you just haven't dropped it.
No, I've mentioned it before. I have mentioned it I think that's part of the start of this podcast. But yes, and it's a Hitchcock movie. It stars Jimmy Stewart, and it's kind of it's not like it's not a great film.
Do you know what, Sam? It's not a great film.
It's not a great film, but it's an interesting film in the history of movie making, I think.
Absolutely. It's quite technically it's a real movie nerd movie, especially now. Like, 75 years removed from when this movie came out. God, my brain just struggled to comprehend the actual reality of the fact that 1948 was 75 years ago.
It was always like your brain is stuck in the 2000s. The 70s was 30 years ago.
It's 2003, right? It's always 2003, like constantly 2003. 10 years ago was the 90s. But like, so it's kind of a weird movie from that point of view because, like I said, it's based on a play. They basically haven't adapted it at all.
But it's shot like a play, isn't it? It's shot like a play. It's like one scene, and you just it feels a bit like one of the early like 1920s and 30s movies where they hadn't really figured out that they could have like scenes, that they could do different things. They just shot plays basically. And
well, it's kind of where I think this movie certainly, and they've been doing this in movies for a while, so I don't want to make out like Hitchcock could, invented moving the camera. But this is really like a really clever and obviously like experimental way of saying like, what if the camera is a person? What if the camera is the viewer? And I think that's like a somewhat revolutionary way of thinking of the process of making a film. Yeah. So rather than, like you said, it's very stagey. The set is like, you could believe that it's literally a stage. You could almost put like canned laughter in there. And not there's anything funny in this film.
Yeah.
But like that's that sort of thing, that sort of sitcom level set. But the camera moves. The camera kind of moves with the people, so we move not necessarily like through rooms. It's not the that Scorsese shot from Goodfellas, like through the underpass. But the camera moves with the characters. It zooms in on the piano. It zooms in on the sofa that they're eating on. It zooms into the dining room. Yeah. It kind of follows the characters around the apartment, like, which is really clever and maybe something that, like, in a movie with more than one location, you would sort of lose a bit of that, or you wouldn't appreciate it as much. But in this, it's very much like it's a play, except we're going to follow which characters are important, as opposed to all the people in a play who are kind of standing around pretending to talk while the characters talk, Yeah.
Yeah. And there's things like there's play techniques from what I remember as well. Like the backgrounds move on like they're on, it's like a cycle. What's the word? There's a word for it, isn't there? Where the backgrounds move and they can pull them on pulleys. And there's like, it's basically in real time as well. So, or near enough in real time. So it feels like you're watching, a play as opposed to, or
do you mean the skyline or do you mean the apartment behind them?
Both, maybe. Again, haven't seen it for 10
years. It's quite singular. So I don't want to, like, we're not doing an hour long episode on this, but it's a really cool movie. Strap on. Wait. That's an American Dad reference.
Every single time.
We know. So like it's got quite an impressive. So the movie opens, and the whole plot is that these two guys, and I love this because it comes up in movies. It's come up in movies ad infinitum forever. This idea that like these two guys, and it's based on a real crime, have decided that they're really fucking clever, and they know this professor or teacher or something who's played by Jimmy Stewart, and he's sort of like infected them with this idea that only the really intelligent and the really educated, they kind of like, they should be above the law because they are reasoning people. And so, but these kids have kind of interpreted that as this really bougie kind of like fucking, like upper class Americans have decided that the laws don't apply to them. They're going to commit the perfect murder, not because they dislike this guy, not for any other personal reason, just because they think they can, because they've got this like belief that they can do it, and that because they can, they should.
They're so exceptional, aren't they? They're so like,
yeah. There's literally another movie, like a really not recent, but like 20 years ago movie that's based on a similar thing where, which again is based on like a real life. This is something that happens in life all of the time,
the halls of Yale or whatever. These
preppy, educated, rich people who think they are above everyone else.
Yeah,
I can't remember the name
because
of it, the movie.
Statistically, they are, and they'll get away with. I mean, look.
But usually what happens is they decide they're going to commit the perfect murder, and then they're caught immediately because they are stupid, like all murderers. Like most murderers, they're just really, really stupid. I think there was somewhat recent, and it was two like 18 and 19-year-olds decided to, again similar to this, just sort of murder a kid, just some kid. They did it just to prove, just to like to commit the perfect murder. But they left loads and loads of DNA evidence at the crime scene.
We invented DNA.
anyway, so getting away from that, you then have the fact that they've killed this guy in the very first part of this movie, and then the rest of the movie is them having this dinner party while like the corpse is in this chest that they're eating dinner off, which is quite macabre. Loads of the reviews at the time are really interesting because they're like, oh, it's quite gruesome and violent. I'm like, is it? I guess we've been in here to like
the
alien like, pulling someone's spine out. So
we grew up with the internet, so nothing is.
They grew up with World War II.
But they grew up with the sanitized World War II. They didn't get this. You can't go on fucking Reddit and look at Ukraine combat videos like we can right now. So maybe. I've just loaded up the Wikipedia page, and there's a great contemporary review from Variety magazine. Hitchcock could have chosen a more entertaining subject with which to use the arresting camera and staging technique displayed in Rope. The continuous action and extremely mobile camera are technical features of which industry craftsmen will make much, but to the layman audience, effect is a distracting interest. And I'm like, that is perfect. They fucking nailed it, because it is a technically, like, and especially in the context of cinema history, you go, wow, brilliant, innovative. But then actually, like, I don't think it's a great film. I'm not sitting there going, oh, I want to watch.
But it's interesting for like loser nerds like us who really appreciate the fact that. So I was reading about it, and you can see all of the transitions from the shots. There are four shots in this movie, and there aren't 4 shots.
There's a great grid.
They composite quite a lot of it, but there are 4 distinct transitions in this movie that kind of serve for like breaking up each individual sort of set piece. The first 2 are the back of the main guy's suit, his like black suit, because this movie is in color, which surprised me as well for 1948 for this movie. And it's this back of his black suit, and the very last one is when Jimmy Stewart lifts up the lid of the chest, towards the end, and that's when you kind of have like the camera pulls back, and that's the final sort of like he sits down. And anyway. But like, it's really cool how you can sort of split it up into those 4, and obviously those aren't continuous shots. They did composite and edit some other stuff
like
together.
There's 10 segments of various length. The longest one being 10 minutes, and there's someone
which is pretty fucking impressive.
Has time coded them on Wikipedia. Yeah, so it is, and it's one of those films. I think like I'm always reminded of going back and watching Citizen Kane. Because I'm so cool. But actually, if you go back and watch it in 20...
Sam is better than you. He watched Citizen Kane before it was cool.
If you go back and watch that film, like the, artistic genius auteur that I am, you look at it and go, you're like, well, all right.
Spat tea all over my computer there.
In recognition of my genius, I think.
Yes, of course.
If you go back and watch that film, you're like, what's the big deal? Like, this is just, I mean, it's entertaining and it's interesting. And Orson Welles is cool, but like, you don't really get it. And it's not until you realize actually what we're seeing in this film was, if not brand new, but was very, very new and very innovative at the time. And mainstream audiences hadn't seen stuff like this. So, like panning shots, or long takes. These are things that we hadn't seen, and so you kind of have to have that context a little bit to be able to stand. I think Rope's probably a good example of that.
Yeah, like filmmaking was in its infancy, and we'd, the 30s, I think the 30s and the 40s
it was probably in its teen years, by 48.
Yeah, definitely.
But
like there was still a lot of stuff that we hadn't quite kind of figured out yet, and a lot of that is technical use of the camera, and part of that is the technological reasons, like your grips. You didn't have a really good steady cam, didn't exist. Like if you wanted to move the camera, you had to be certain that the camera wasn't just going to do this, because then all you've got is something that's totally unusable. Whereas now, we've got like a frame that a camera operator can wear and just walk around and jump and do whatever, and the camera stays relatively steady, so we can pretty much shoot anything. But like this was not the case in 1948. If you wanted a dolly shot, you needed a dolly, and you needed to make sure that it was well made so that the dolly didn't shudder. Something this movie does quite well. I don't know how handheld, I suppose, is also like a thing that maybe didn't exist in the 40s, and there's a lot of zoom in this.
It will be if at the very least
everything was the size of a
body held. It would just be like, oh, my back.
Yeah, it'd be like 14 people lifting a casket. Like, oh, it's a handheld camera.
Someone's holding it with their
3 grips went to the morgue.
But what a shot!
Yeah,
there we go. So
movie as well. This just as like it is quite sort of like. The fact that it's short as well is good. It's just kind of like short. It's fun. You've got Jimmy Stewart being quite electric. You've got most of the rest of the cast being fairly bland. You've got some really stagey acting in here, like the drunk guy at the end, Robert, who's pissed at the end. Like, that's not a good acting. And it was 48. Just get him drunk. Problem solved. Yeah.
He's probably drunk already. Like, just film him as he is. It's fine.
Yeah, just film reality.
Well, that was good. That was interesting.
It was a cool movie. We should definitely do this again because I've got 13 other movies in this box set to watch. So we're going to really explore the 10 movies of this that are 10 Hitchcock movies that are like, these are the ones we could license for very little.
Yeah, and it would be good. To maybe try and find a stream online and watch them. Because they are really good. Like Hitchcock is a good filmmaker. There we go. There's some fantastic insight from the imagination.
just in. Alfred Hitchcock, was he a good filmmaker? I now in 2023, I'm just now saying that as the first person ever.
Listen, guys, have you heard of this guy called Alfred Hitchcock? He's just the best. Absolutely amazing. Hitchcock. Is that it? Yeah, I think so.
Alfie Hitchcock.
Alfie. You love being called Alfie. Famously easy to work with, Alfie.
I could talk about Alfred Hitchcock like just now for 2 or 3 hours. But
unfortunately, we have another.
Yeah,
much
I want to hit like maybe a big Hitchcock movie, maybe Strangers on the Train. I've been toying with this idea.
Rear Window. I really love Rear Window. That's probably my favorite.
I want to do a Hitchcock film, and then I want to do a parody or a remake of a Hitchcock film. And Strangers on a Train. There's a Danny DeVito and that guy who was in When Harry Met Sally. What's his name? Am I thinking of the right guy?
I don't know.
Anyway, it's not going to come to me. Anyway, there's a remake I was talking about on a podcast a few weeks ago. Which is kind of like a comedy, sort of silly, sort of goof on it. But it's interesting to see the sort of same themes played out, but in the inverse. Yeah. Anyway, we didn't come here to talk about Rope, some trashy film from the 40s.
Rope.
We came here to talk about a madman's dream of a milk-proof $300 million blockbuster based on a 1930s sci-fi novel.
Is that the start of the episode? Let's start it there. That feels like a good intro to me. And my name's Sam. And my name's Sam. And Dotar Sojat. Dotar Sojat. Dotar Sojat. What the fuck is going on?
Jeddak. I don't even know if I can know.
So
I had a
many
whole thing.
I
started writing out. I started writing out like an intro where basically I would do it all just with words from this movie, and then just say imaginary movie podcast in the middle of it, and then my name's and then David at the end, and then I would just let you guys come in. But it seemed like with just two of us that would be kind of like asking you to really play up the reaction.
No, I would completely have appreciated that. There is so much nonsense in this movie.
I want to get into why there's nonsense in this movie.
Zdanga, Barsoom,
Barsoom.
I mean, with Dotar Sojat, Jeddak, She-Kalot, Gates of Is. It just goes on.
The movie, Sam. Let's introduce the movie. Let's do a plot summary, and then the first thing I want to hit is fucking sci-fi nonsense words.
Okay, so transported to Barsoom, aka Mars, apparently. A Civil War vet discovers a barren planet seemingly inhabited by 12-foot-tall barbarians. Finding himself prisoner of these creatures, he escapes only to encounter Woola and a princess in desperate need of a savior.
To be clear, the film was John Carter from 2012, because we haven't actually mentioned it.
You've read the thing.
Honestly, this is one occasion, Sam, where I couldn't expect anyone to marry up that you've just read with the movie title John Carter.
John Carter.
When you said we should watch this the other day, I genuinely in my head thought you meant the basketball movie with Denzel Washington, which I think is called Coach Carter. Like, again, this doesn't evoke like a sci-fi epic, you know.
It's one of those films. Oh well, we should contextualize it as well, because it's one of those films that is infamous for being a box office bomb, and that I think is why we're here, isn't it? We're here to talk about like box office bombs, and we want to get into why these films fail. And I hadn't seen this before, and I was reading through Wikipedia beforehand and I've got loads of.
No one has seen this before, Sam.
But I've got loads of stuff from the Wikipedia article, which is trying to explain why this failed. It was the marketing, and it was the filmmakings in the decision making in the film, but also maybe like Mars isn't a thing that we're into anymore, and then like Disney buried it, and there's all these there's loads of excuses going around about why this film didn't work. And then I watched it, and I'm like, it's because it's shit. It's because it's a crap movie. It's absolutely terrible.
I hate to disagree with you, Sam. I don't think this is a great movie. I really want to make that clear. I really don't think this is a great movie. But we've seen worse movies that made loads of money at the box office. I think this movie is forgotten and lost, Sam, because they biffed the marketing maybe as badly as any movie has ever done so.
Dave, I couldn't disagree more, because the marketing is one thing, right? But if your film is good, you will find an audience. How many films?
I don't think that's true.
I think it is true, because look at all of the cult films that don't have the support of the studio yet break through. Yet we have letter writing campaigns. We have people Shawshank Redemption buying it on VHS, etc. It goes on and on and on.
But like, after the point, you are right. There has to be a certain quality or a certain distinguishing feature about a movie to make it a cult movie after the fact. Like, I think there's a lot aligned to make this film, number one, impossible to find because it's got the blandest name you can possibly imagine.
Oh, the name.
If you'd seen this, and even if you'd really liked it, you could be forgiven for not remembering the name John Carter, because you don't hear it that much. It's a stupid, bland name. The fact that the marketing's so shit, the fact it was buried afterwards, there's no you'd think there'd be action figures. You'd think they would have
there was nothing
done the Star Wars model. Let's make action figures. Let's get a deal with McDonald's.
Can we talk about the title? Can we talk about the title of this? Because it's based off a turn of the century 1912 Princess of Mars, I think, is it? Like, it's a serialized
Yeah, so the
book.
first one is a Princess of
A
Mars.
Princess of Mars, right? Which is funny because straight away they were like, well, obviously we can't call it. But God, Princess is the same thing that we saw with The Princess and the Frog Disney movie. And there was a similar debate that happened with Tangled, the Rapunzel film, which is Princess and the Frog came out, it was a bit underwhelming for Disney. And so they were going to make Rapunzel, which is like one of the most expensive movies ever made. And they didn't want to call it Rapunzel because they were like, well, boys aren't going to see it because it's about a girl. So they called it Tangled, and they had there's a prominent male character in that. Now, they're the same debate with this, and they have the same debate about a princess, but also even calling it John Carter on Mars, which I think would make a lot more sense. But you know what they were worried about? They were worried about that women wouldn't go to see it because women don't like science fiction. And it's like, number one, let's just step back a second to Disney's fucking naming. Mulan, Cinderella, Moana, Sleeping Beauty, Beauty and the Beast, Snow White, Pocahontas, Alice in Wonderland. I mean, these are, we've got smash hit movies that have women's names in them or princess in the title, and that we're absolutely fine. And so the idea, again, this is I want to push against this. The idea that we can blame the failure of this on the title, I just think is nonsense.
No, I don't think it's the title, Sam. I think like it's not just the title. The title's a big part of it, but it's also the marketing and how executives like quite often are quite stupid and quite. Let me try and phrase this in a way that makes sense. So, as is often the case, to get to the head of your profession, which being a movie executive, you are quite high up in the movie making business. You're probably of the older generation, even than the people who are making the films. Which means you're 2 generations older
almost
than the
certainly
people watching the films.
Buying.
Which means you're obviously totally fucking like not in touch, which is why they do focus groups, things like that. I was listening to something recently about Jennifer's Body, which is Jessica, what's her name? Megan Fox film, which you won't have heard of because they also like totally fucked up marketing for almost the exact same reason. Because that's a horror movie about Megan Fox becoming a succubus who like just it's really really bloody. She just eats men, but it's not like a, as you'd expect in, I think this was 2009 or something. It's not like a isn't Jennifer Fox a Megan Fox sexy movie like she'd been in the Transformer films and things like that. But because the marketing executives knew who Megan Fox was, all the marketing was like basically her tits and ass on things, despite the fact that's not the film. What the film's about. They even filmed scenes for the trailer, like overly sexual scenes that aren't in the movie, because focus groups had basically said there's an interview with Megan Fox and the director, and apparently someone in one of the focus groups said more boobs, BEWBS. And that was their only comment. And these are the sort of people they got in to do the focus group because they wanted to market this movie about a relationship, a friendship between 2 women, and this like supernatural element. They wanted to market it to teenage boys because statistically, and this is the same thing with this movie, statistically, teenage boys are the biggest
18 to 35.
18 to 35. So you want to market all your movies to them. So again, that's an executive coming in and saying, I don't give a shit what your movie's about. Yeah. This is how we're going to market it. And this movie, go on.
Well, no, I think you're right. I think from what I've read on John Carter is that there was failures in the marketing. Like I think people moved on halfway through the project. Also, Disney was buying Lucasfilm at the time, and so was like, well, we're not going to waste all of our sci-fi capital on this shit when we know that just a few years later we're going to be dumping a Star Wars movie.
Film studios are quite pragmatic when it comes to the sunk cost fallacy. That like they're quite happy to jettison a 300 million product that's finished, rather than spending another 300 million trying to sell it.
Yeah. I mean, look at the Warner Brothers debacle recently with that film. Yeah, they just canned it. They just absolutely canned it.
And it was finished. Yeah, and they canned it so they could write off a tax. Yeah,
Like
but
it is. I just think we are, this movie. There were failures. A lot of it seems to fall on Andrew Stanton's door, the director, and kind of
I think
creative
this is
mind.
his first live action movie.
Yeah, so he'd done Bugs
different.
Life, Wall-E, Finding Nemo, so like smash hits, and obviously a very talented filmmaker. But he again, I don't, just from what I've read, he seems to come across as being quite obstinate about this movie, quite unwilling to suggest for a second that maybe if you fill your movie with loads of fucking jargon that nobody understands, and maybe if you don't give us as an audience any reason to give a shit about these characters, like, it's not going to be an engaging film. But then he seems to be like blaming almost the audience for not getting it, and I think
it's the problem of like fantasy nerds. Let's talk about fantasy nerds for a minute. Where's Joe? I feel like I've just summoned him. Fantasy nerds.
Say it 3 times.
He's going to look for my coming at dawn on the 5th day in the east.
You probably got that quote wrong. You probably got that quote wrong, and he's gonna. Someone's gonna write.
He's going to arrive at my house somehow in the next half an hour to beat the shit out of me for getting that quote wrong for the 454th consecutive
That's from
time.
the movie and not from the books.
Anyway, so it's a fantasy book, which is fine. I think there's a lot that genre offers, especially in 2012. Like, I just while I'm thinking about it, these are the top grossing films from 2012, and we can loop back to this.
Mm-hmm.
The Avengers, The Dark Knight Rises, The Hunger Games, Skyfall, The Hobbit, the second Twilight film, Amazing Spider-Man, Brave, Ted, and Madagascar 3.
Right.
Like,
so straight away,
some of those aren't like the others.
Number one, Avengers. So Disney put this up again. I mean, I don't know when they released in terms of month, but we're still in the same year in terms of, filling the movie void. Avengers comes out in the same year. And that is a huge moment because we'd already had 3 or 4 films to build up to that.
I suppose, though, in fairness, that the Marvel Cinematic Universe was still like, they could have bailed at any point. I think the Avengers was the first movie to make, after Iron Man, to make loads of money.
Mm-hmm.
So I think like they put the Avengers, they obviously didn't know they were going to make another 30 of these movies over the next decade, and make billions and billions and billions of dollars.
But still to be going up, and then what was the other one you mentioned?
The Hobbit was the other big fantasy movie.
The Hunger Games. That to me, that's
another fantasy novel, sci-fi.
Like it's the event. It's like kind of like fantasy adventure, isn't it? That's and then you're going up against that. That was really well anticipated during the novels were big before the movie. So I just think there's a lot of things that go wrong on the side, and when you compare it to like the list of all-time box office bombs, this is number one. This is number one adjusted for inflation, and it's number one nominals because it was so big. It was such a huge loss. Disney spent $263 million on it and got back 284. So you're looking up to 236 million.
I've seen a lot of figures that say it's probably more like 300 million in production costs.
With marketing costs, even with shit marketing.
Even with marketing costs, I think it's more like 400. Like, because they did even then it costs you to like have posters made and trailers and things like that. But I wanted to talk before we dive into the era of the time. I just wanted to talk a bit about sci-fi adaptations, because we now live in the world where every fucking like popular fantasy or sci-fi novel that's ever been written that more than 3 people have read is getting an Amazon adaptation or a Netflix adaptation. As of now, The Wheel of Time is a big one that came out last year. Obviously, Game of Thrones, The Witcher. Like, we are just drowning. It's the Lord of the Rings, the first age, the second age, the third age. I don't know how many ages there were. but like we are drowning in like a sea of this. But we weren't in 2012. Like you had Lord of the Rings. This is the year. This is the year the first Hobbit film came out. So this is kind of like the first attempt to sort of like recapitalize on that movie product. On that, I keep referring to this as fantasy because I really feel like it's kind of that right on the cusp of fantasy and sci-fi.
It's like
it's not hard sci-fi.
1980s fantasy movie.
It's a sword and sandals movie.
Sword and sandals, totally, but in space.
In space,
yeah,
like Dune, like June.
Yeah,
which also came out really recently. So it's kind of like silly. So the things you get in sci-fi and fantasy, you get stupid names. So, like you said, the Jeddak, the fucking Ninth Ray, something or other.
Sojat.
Sojat. I still don't know what that means.
I don't know.
And you're the wrong guy to tell me.
I'm relying on you to get through the plot of this because
you get so much of this, and like when you're adapting something, there's a kind of a point. There's a point where you draw a line in the sand and say, like, maybe we should like rewrite some of this, and like that's always the funny line to walk, isn't it? Where you want to be true to the source material because you know that source material is successful. That's the reason you're adapting it, is because people like it. I guess with a 1912 novel, you're not too worried about the fans who've all been dead for 60 years.
Yeah.
Like, you're not too worried about the hardcore fans.
Mm-hmm.
You're probably more concerned with like adapting it to make like a decent screenplay. I think that's maybe the step that most of these movies that are bad, and I think this is a pretty bad story, fall down, is that like you need an extra step between the adaptation and the screenplay.
Well,
get the adaptation, turn that into a movie rather than just making that into a movie.
You said it. You said the one word, 4 syllables, adaptation. Like, why is Lord of the Rings the best fantasy movie ever made?
It's because they cut 40% of it out.
Fran Walsh and Peter Jackson knew how to write a movie and knew what to get rid of. And
and they didn't sing a single fucking song.
They shot Tom Bombadil in the head, and they paraded his corpse.
It's real greaseball shit among the. Oh shit! Joe would have me. I should have the name of the Gandalf race.
Pathetic. You get rid of all of the stuff you don't need, right? But this goes back to a wider point about like the reverence to the source material. Stanton was basically said, like, I thought that it was that I could go into this detail, I could explore all of this Dotar Sojat shit because people knew about it. No one knew about this. This wasn't something that was in the consciousness. You know,
it's not like Game of Thrones. There's no like public fluency.
There's nothing, and I think this is a bit of a victim of the cultural osmosis because we've seen all this. Like George Lucas mined this to death, or this kind of like turn of the century 1920s drama, space opera style stuff, and so a lot of it's not very new. That's the thing when you're watching this. It's like a lot of this just looks like Attack of the Clones because it's in the desert, and so I think in some ways, to be fair, the draw of like space, aliens on Mars isn't a thing. It isn't a thing because literally in the turn of the century, people were arguing that there were constructed canals on Mars because we could see them through our shit telescopes. There was something there, but we didn't know what it was. And there were genuine arguments to say that there's creatures up there. Now we know that Mars is a barren wasteland with nothing on it. But
like you said, there was this really popular theory, and it's not just this. Asimov, everyone who wrote sci-fi had Mars as this like ancient civilization that existed millennia before ours. You know,
but now we're looking at it. In 2012, we're watching.
Now we've got a fucking rover up there, and there is nothing.
It's they're literally fucking tweeting from the surface of Mars, these robots, and it's totally a totally insane idea that I just don't think you can get your head around. You can't just think, okay, well, but where is this happening? Like, is this on the other side of Mars? Is there a dark side of Mars that we don't see? And the answer is no. And so I just think the connection is.
Do you think the screenplay would be easier to swallow if it was just a planet? If it was
honestly think
Planet X and it wasn't.
Give us a civilization. Give us a Guardians of the Galaxy style. Like, this is the world, and this is the universe that we're gonna create. And I think absolutely, to me, there's just something wrong with the setting, and there's something wrong with trying to connect that to the modern world, which is an entire plot line that I just don't understand whatsoever. Don't understand.
Can we talk through the plot a bit?
Yeah. Can you talk?
I feel like
you talk it through.
right.
Just explain to me.
The bit I hate the most about this movie is the fact that in the year of our Lord, and I keep saying the year of our Lord, but in the year of our Lord, 2012, we had a character who is a former Confederate soldier. Like, he fought for slavery, and that's our protagonist in the movie. That's the main character. So we have like 20 minutes at the beginning where this, like, again, this guy who literally fought to uphold slavery, like literally fought to uphold slavery.
Don't talk about that.
Like, basically outlines his plan to fucking steal a bunch of gold that presumably belonged to some kind of Native American, as far as he's concerned, to steal a bunch of gold, become rich, and I don't know, like, maybe still try and uphold slavery because he's a piece of shit.
It's the classic hero's journey, isn't it? Like, we're what's going on?
There's a really Indiana Jones feel to the very beginning of this movie. I don't know whether you agree.
Well, I was actually quite invested at the start of this movie. I was at the very start. I was going.
I don't know, when you find out he fought for the Confederacy and he doesn't seem particularly contrite about it.
Yeah, that less so. I'll be honest. But I was at least it's like, because actually I quite like westerns, and I quite like that, indie kind of vibe that you get from those type of films. They don't make films like that anymore because they all absolutely bomb in the box office because people don't like this type of movie anymore. Like westerns, those classic adventure movies, they just die. They just die a death. And so many of the films in the shit list are of that kind of
they are and they aren't. I think you are right, Sam. The classical sort of like your Indiana Jones, like 30 serial movies aren't really a thing anymore. But we still love, like, the Pirates of the Caribbean those movies came out. I think the second one came out the year before this.
Yeah.
So they're in the zeitgeist as well. Like, those are basically like, they are westerns in a lot of ways.
Swashbuckling adventure movies.
Swashbuckling adventure movies.
Mm-hmm.
So like, there is obviously an audience for that. But the key thing seems to be to like make it funny. But like in this, you have this whole kind of like western thing. And I liked the sort of like the chasing on the horses. I liked Bryan Cranston for some unknown reason in this movie. But he didn't fight to uphold slavery, so thumbs up Bryan Cranston.
He's a guy I can get behind.
He's a guy I hate Taylor Kitsch in this movie. I'm not sure I've ever seen anything again with him in, because he's just a plank of fucking wood in this movie. And I don't know whether he's just a bad actor or whether he's directed to be a plank of wood. Like in the prequel trilogy where everyone's acting below their ability. I don't know how much of it is that. For a guy who's used to like directing voice actors and storyboarding emotions. Anyway, he falls into a cave after being attacked, fights with this skinhead, which you'd think they'd be mates, kills him, and then he's like somehow transported to Barsoom. We hear that 11 million times in this movie.
God.
And it's always Barsoom. It's all this gravity, which is bizarre. And then we're kind of into the like, and I again quite like this aspect of a movie, like the where the fuck am I? What the fuck is that? What the fuck is going on? Except you've hired Taylor Kitsch to be your shirtless like protagonist. And
what you wanted,
to be bothered by any of this. You don't get the. Can you imagine Brendan Fraser in this role?
I was literally about to say Brendan Fraser. What you want is Brendan Fraser in this film, or you want, 1990s Harrison Ford
type. Yeah,
someone who
like
is.
We talked about Conan earlier. Like, not an amazing movie, but you hire someone who's got like a bit of an imposing threat. who you could, and then you're fine with it being like a by rote, no fucking exposition.
It's not
we're
complicated.
Just gonna go beat up aliens.
Exactly. It's not complicated, is it? Simply.
But this is the fucking year of Twilight. This is the year the last Twilight movie came out. So everyone has to look like a fucking emo vampire, like Edward Cullen from those movies. So he's got the long hair. He's inexplicably pale for a soldier. Typically, they spend a lot of time outdoors. Like he looks like a vampire again because that was in 2012. What a dark, bleak time for the world, where that was what was the male epitome of beauty. Was like, look at this sexy, skinny guy who's the fucking color of alabaster. Fantastic. Oh, and he's wearing eyeliner. Fantastic. Cracking. That green stubble they get. Yeah, absolutely.
It really just makes him pop. Absolutely. It's yes, I don't know where to begin. The thing with this film, and the thing that really that I can't get over, is that when you're introducing a world, we've got a Confederate captain. Excellent. Okay, we'll just forget about that. We'll move on from that. That's fine.
Let's not worry about that for now.
What are we going to do then? We're going to transport him to Mars. I mean, how he gets there is just fucking baffling. So underwritten.
That's fine until they try and explain it later, because it's magic. It's magic. It's fine. There's a burst of blue light. He's on Mars.
Fine. But when you're introducing all of these ideas and you're introducing your world and your concept and all this other stuff, like you have to bring the audience with you. You have to treat the audience with a little bit of respect and not talk down to them, but also like you need to explain. We need a scene. We need a Obi-Wan sits Luke down and explains the Force to him scene in this. Hold on before you fucking respond, because if you don't have that, if you don't have that moment where we get to take a breath, yes, let's have some action. He gets chased by the ugly aliens, and then we have a scene where someone draws. They do it later on, where they draw on the map, but I need that earlier. I need to understand what the hell is going on. Give us an elder. Give us, even if they had a human, right, who was a grizzled human who's been there for 1,000 years, and he is able to give us a bit of grounding, and there's a bit of dynamic between those two, whatever. But like, I have no idea what's going on, and that thread, I have to say, and I'm not particularly attentive when it comes to crap movies. I zone out so quickly, but even still, I had no idea what was happening through a good 70% of this film. Like, I'm watching it going,
I don't necessarily disagree. Like, there's a real lack of for me, it's kind of understanding why anyone's doing the things that they're doing, which is always a big weakness.
Oh, the motivation's terrible.
And I didn't necessarily. You know what? You are right, Sam. You need one or the other. You either need the Obi-Wan scene where you have, maybe he's arrested the minute he arrives, he's thrown in prison, and someone in his cell talks. We have a little library scene in the cell, and it explains, "You're from Jarsoon, Earth of Jarsoon," and he knows what that is, but he tells him he's a liar and a whatever. It's a myth. You're a liar. You're a madman. Whatever. Like, and he gives us a bit of history to explain how mad he is. Like, you either need that, or I need a really, really stunningly clever, like, emotional pull for why this guy is doing what he's doing.
Yeah. Why does he not just, number one, spend all of his energy trying to get back? As the film progresses, he seems to be pulled in by the allure of this princess or something, but then he's also
gone to a different planet, Sam, and he's Superman. Of course he doesn't want to go home, and that's fine, but you kind of need to like lay that down for me, where he's like, I could go back where I'm a wanted man because I tried to uphold white people, owning people of other people.
Yeah,
and I literally fought in a war to protect that because I believed that was a right thing to do. Whereas here, everyone loves me. I'm the Jeddak Noir, fucking Opal, whatever. What is it?
Jeddak of Zaganda.
Jeddak of Zaganda. Yeah, you see, why couldn't I remember that?
The Dejar, the Shang, Seb-San, Tharks.
But like, actually, if they'd had the pathos to say, like, in this movie of him to be like, have that realization of actually, it's kind of cool here. Like, these people need me. Someone needs me, and maybe like you could write in like then people needed me in the war, but they don't anymore. And what's my place? And
because we freed the slaves. So
Make
we
him a
don't need.
Union soldier. Just make him a Union soldier. Anyway, because it's 2012. Anyway, let's just shelve that for a minute, Sam. Let's shelve the fact. And this book was written in 1912, so much more acceptable in 1912 to have a Confederate veteran in a movie and in a story,
Those
and not have
poor
him be the bad
Confederate
guy.
veterans down in their luck
Yeah.
after losing the war. They can't find their place in the world, so they're going to go to Mars. It's like,
Well, in 1912, Sam, we were still 50 or 60 years out from civil rights, so you know, not that much had changed. Anyway, and you can maybe have this thing where like John Carter, stupid name, maybe has this thing where like, and you can just fucking be stupid about it. Just have him tell somebody, have him have an analog he can talk to in this movie, and say, "I feel like I belong here," and then the all's lost moment and everything like that. But you can kind of have that thing where I want to stay, not because he's in love with this woman he's had 4 conversations with. She is very good looking, we'll give him that, but like, I don't know, mate, you're really gonna throw over your entire life. Anyway, less of that, and more of like, these people need me. I have a place here. I can do some good. I can, you know, make amends for all the atrocities I did during the war, which he definitely did. Or you know what I mean? Like, he has this power and this like responsibility to use it to sort of help these people. Do you know what I mean? Because he is this bone density thing and the gravity difference, which I kind of like.
But
apart from the actual looking at it, but I kind of like the idea of it. And
yeah, but the other
we don't get any of that.
So what do we get? This is the thing. This is the thing that I just can't pin down. I can't pin down any reason for him to want to do any of this.
It's a total. We're doing these things because the script says we have to do these
so.
things.
And you know what? This goes back to my thing. Is like, yeah, your marketing shit, your title's crap, but you're not giving me any reason to care. I honestly went into this thinking it's not going to be that bad. It'll be a bit opaque, and it'll be maybe not that friendly. But really, there'll be a good sense of story. There'll be a good, there'll be a truth to hang on to that will keep me going through the film. A golden thread of an idea. Nothing, absolutely nothing. What we do get is loads of characters with no motivation or cartoonish evil motivation, like most of these bad guys. This main bad guy with the blue Iron Man blaster thing. What the fuck does he want? He wants to kill the other cities. What are the cities
he
called?
At least
Uganda
wants
versus Helium. Helium.
He wants world domination. He's very much like a arch 1912 criminal villain.
But why?
Yeah, because he's a conqueror and all of that, or whatever, or mineral rights, or that's too boring, I suppose. The real baddie is Mark Strong, who is this kind of like weird immortal guy. Who has a speech where he explains to John Carter
and the audience
that basically they don't care. Basically, they've decided this guy's going to be the king, and we decide things. So that's that. And he takes the time to have this speech. Why are you not putting a bullet in this fucking guy's head? Anyway,
but also, movie. Did you just say the quiet part loud? Like you can't just say that your characters don't give a shit. Like, you have to give us a reason. Why are they doing any of this?
I'm sure a failure in the adaptation of
if
this guy's the bad guy, and I'm certain in the books they're not really the bad guy. They're more of like a semi-neutral kind of like
probably an allegory for God. Yes.
Yeah, but fucking 1912, you betcha. But like in the movie, it just means that your arch bad guy, the most terrifying villain, basically has a speech where he's like, "You see, we don't really care. Like, basically, we'll get ours. So fuck you." It doesn't even bother killing anyone. Like, I kind of need the evil guy to be a bit more evil. Even the guy who's like the conquering guy with the city on spider legs, which is baffling, torturously baffling. And I've got lots of questions about the economics.
It's a visual.
What do they eat? How many people are we talking about? Like,
it's a visual thing of like, wow, that's cool. But then, exactly, it's the same. It's the same question that J.R. Martin asked. About Aragorn. Okay, Aragorn, now you're in charge. What's your economic policy?
Yeah.
As soon as my brain just starts having these questions and I can't get over it. Which I know is because I'm a nerd, but this movie should be answering those questions for me because I'm a nerd.
It should be, Sam, or it should have the eloquent like grandeur of the Lord of the Rings stories.
Yeah,
like if you make it mythology, suddenly it doesn't matter that you're not getting into the agrarian structure of these two Martian cities. Like, suddenly it doesn't
How did they
matter that
deal
you're
with
not
sanitation?
exactly. What are the rules on marriage? Because seemingly there's a very heteronormative marriage situation on Mars where there are four-armed aliens, green aliens called Thargs running about,
The patriarchy
laying
knows
eggs
no
everywhere.
bounds. It knows no bounds.
But our hero can only have sex maritally. Like, fucking absolutely astounding. But you kind of either need to have that or you need it to have it be mythology and a bit grander and maybe more voiceovers. And I hate voiceovers, but maybe more like, and the age of, and all seemed lost. And then you can have it, even like Willow, have it be more of like an epic, you know, like a very cut and dry. But by having Mark Strong, who, like, he's an actor, he can do things, he's good in stuff. Like, just basically say, you know, we're gonna fuck with your shit, man, but we're not gonna kill you or anything. We're not bad guys.
Yeah.
And then having the bad guy turn to try and help him, only to be killed, and it's like, why do I care? Why? And that was the overriding thought I had during all of this nonsense: was, why do I care? Why do I care about
Because
fucking Edward Cullen, the fucking transplanetary vampire, and his big jumping skills?
because
why do I care?
Because you're invested in the character. Nope. Because you're interested in how the story develops over the wider scene of Mars and the kind of geopolitics. Nope. You care about the princess. I mean, she's a bit more, but she's not. That's just Xena warrior princess. It's not really.
I think
not
she's
really
fine. She's a little bit underwritten. I just think she's getting nothing from Taylor Kitsch.
It doesn't matter. You
Like,
exactly. So
just
we're not
getting nothing from him.
So we're not invested in that. So you're going through the list, and even these Mark Strong, you know, the gods, like, what do they kind of want to, like, take the resources from the planet or something? Like,
That's
they want
very, very poorly explained.
But again, why? Why do you want to do that? Is it because you want to be rich? Is it because you just want power? You want to destroy
what you need
the world?
to do, Sam, is just throw in a line about the proper order. Throw in and then you can explain that's why he hasn't killed him. He's got to send him back because these guys are the keepers of order. Like, that's why he's getting this guy take over, because Mars is doomed to fail.
It's
and there's
not
keepers of order. But
Yep.
they don't say that. We say, brah, we're here to mine something.
Example.
Don't worry about it.
Example, The Fifth Element, right? And my recent learning that Luc Besson is an absolute dickhead aside.
We should have a wall of shame, and it should just encompass. It's going to be a big wall. Every man in Hollywood,
yeah, everyone,
and some of the women.
You have to prove to us that you're not an abuser, and then you come off the wall.
You should get a card. Everyone's got SAG cards. You should have a not a sexual assaulter card in Hollywood.
Yeah,
You're fucking tested every 3 months.
Luc Besson seems to be even higher than that. He seems to be on the fucking paedophilia level. But anyway, Fifth Element is a good film, and there's the what's the bad guy in that movie? It's a giant orb of fire, and what does it want? Just to kill everything, just to destroy and maim and bring down hell and wrath on everything. Why does it want it? Because it's evil. That's enough. Like, this is what I don't understand, is that it's not difficult. It's not difficult to just write, to make the reason that they want to do this is because they're evil and because they want to maintain an order. Like, all of these things aren't that complicated. The main Iron Man bad guy, he to me is probably the worst character in this, because
which guy do you mean?
The guy with who's got the blue thing. They give the
evil king.
The evil king. Looking Sabthan, the Jeddak of Zuganda.
It doesn't matter because he's not a character in this movie. Like, we have the first scene at the very beginning of the movie where he gets given the blue thing, which is never explained and we never get to see being used really. Like, where's John Carter's blue thing? Why can't we have why isn't that part of this fucking movie?
Yeah,
because I bet it's part of those books.
But he wants to marry the princess. He wants to marry the princess, doesn't he? Like, that's his initial thing, is I want to marry the princess.
Yeah, he's the sheriff of Nottingham, basically.
The princess says no, and thus but then her dad's like trying to get him to do it. I mean, the whole
what you
marriage plot.
misunderstood, Sam, because it's not explained, is Mars super religious, so super Christian. We really love God on Mars.
Yep.
And there is no sex before marriage, so he wants to bang this woman, so he's gonna have to marry her. Those are just the rules. He can't circumvent that. He might be the fucking destructive king of one of the only 2 cities on the entire planet, but he's gonna marry this woman, Sam. It's so stupid.
It's just so it's and I think all of these things compound, right? They compound to the point where when there are cool scenes, like we have a fight with these ape things in an arena later on, we also have lots of cool stuff with these. I mean, I don't love the character design, to be honest, of the aliens. You know,
I liked them.
I think it's fine, and I think they're weird enough. But I wish they were a bit more human, just so you could try and connect emotionally with them a little bit more. But anyway, like they're fine and they're interesting, and they're like probably the most interesting part of the movie in terms of, well, these guys seem actually to be like on their own, have their own motivations on their own side.
Up until the white savior moment.
Up until the white savior moment. And this is like just it's like they didn't update any of it. They didn't update any of it from the early 20th century. I don't understand that.
Because what you've got is a framework for like, I really liked, to be positive for a second, I really liked how this looked, largely, unless the camera was on Taylor Kitsch, which it is quite a lot. Otherwise, I really liked most of the CG in this. I thought it was pretty good. I liked the look of the aliens with the forearms. I liked that they were sort of cleverly animated, mostly, so that they were kind of like not doing stuff in a human, not in a human way. Like it wasn't just, like the mocap with 2 arms that just follow the top arms. Like they'd obviously put work into figuring out what they were doing there.
Yeah.
I like the look of them. I liked a lot of the voice performances. I think the main Tharg is Willem Dafoe, which you wouldn't know, but that's
no, it was good. No, I did notice that. Yeah,
I think they're good. I like most of the scenes I liked in this movie had the Thargs in them. I think all the fucking like Asgard city business was a bit dull and boring. Also, any scene in which Taylor Kitsch was jumping, I found deeply upsetting. Other than that, I really liked this look into this alien world. And what you had with these books is like you had a ready-made world. You kind of just needed to plug in and tell a story. And this is what we're talking about, adaptations. You're not having to fucking pay the author. It's in the public domain. You can take this, fucking tear it into pieces, have a shit on it, light it on fire, and then just squash it into a ball and put it on screen, and literally no one will be upset because no one cares.
And this is, and again, let's go back to the director and the writer of the film, Andrew Stanton, who wrote Toy Story, Bug's Life, Toy Story 2, did the screenplay for Monsters Inc., wrote Finding Nemo, wrote WALL-E, did the story for Toy Story 3. Like we go down the list of like Toy Story 2 is probably one of the tightest and just brilliantly written scripts in cinema. Like it's so good. It's in an hour and a half we are taken through a whirlwind of emotions and action and whatever. Fantastic. And I just don't understand how he obviously had quite a lot of control, because he could say no to certain things and Disney were kind of not that invested anyway. But how we got to the point with a writer who's so accomplished and so successful, where you're like, just like, give me a reason to care. Please give me a reason to give a shit about this. I don't want to keep going on and on, but it's the fundamental failure of this movie is like, it looks cool. Yeah, it's kind of some weird ideas, but I was never once invested in this. And that is the thing I just don't get.
Really have. The plot is kind of very diffuse. It's very much like it's a sci-fi novel, the first one, which is kind of like fine for you to set up some ideas and some things, and it'd be generally pretty, it's pretty interesting. It's pretty cool. The next book is where I'll get into the things that I'm really interested in, and so on and so on. But for a film, especially a $300 million film that's hoping to like launch a series, if it had been successful, if this had made $1 billion, like there would be 10 of these. You know, this would be the fucking Barsoon expanded universe, which would be a hellscape, and but I can't imagine as bad as our current future. But you didn't do that. You made a bad movie, and it's just. I was thinking about another Disney film. Do you remember the Atlantis movie, the animated one?
Yes, I do. Yeah, I remember
And that shares a lot because just in terms of like. With Avatar having come, the new Avatar having come out like really recently, like I was thinking about not in relation to this movie, which I'd never fucking heard of until you said we should watch it. Like the way that sort of like quote unquote natives are treated, native peoples are treated on screen. So in Avatar, which the first Avatar came out before this movie, you've got another fucking white man, another ex-soldier white man who comes in and saves the day and becomes the fucking leader of the tribe of native people. Because that's the only possible way they could survive is if a white man helps them. And this happens all the time. Now, in Atlantis, which is a Disney movie, right? And I bet somebody on the staff was like, this is very similar to a movie we made 10 years ago. In Atlantis, they go to Atlantis. There's these native peoples, Atlanteans. They're archaeologists / tech thieves or whatever. And the colonel wants to steal like the power source for Atlantis. And we learn that if he does, like Atlantis will fall and all these people will die. The colonel doesn't care because he wants this power source, right? So that's a very simple thing. You have a princess who our main character, voiced by Michael J. Fox, has a romance with. You have her father, who's the king, and you have the same political thing of like, I want to stop these bad guys because I suddenly care about this woman and these people and their way of life, and they deserve to be preserved, right? So you've kind of got a blueprint there of how to maybe tell the story, which they kind of do try to tell because the princess is literally looking for a power source. We get one scene, it's never explained, it's never pursued of what is powering or whatever, anything like that. But like, that's something that is literally happening in this movie. But they just don't bother with any of the call to action. Like, John Carter wants to save the princess. He couldn't give two shits about helium. He wants to save the princess.
Yeah, for reasons that are very surface level. Now, I think maybe
reasons that are very heteronormative. He wants to save her so that she can marry him and not the other guy.
I think maybe we've gone off, started on the wrong foot by having a main character be a Confederate captain. Oh, that doesn't really. It doesn't really suggest that he's going to be that interested in, protecting the livelihoods and experiences of these people, does it? It suggests an imperialist.
Well, what we get as well is the fact we never really get to meet any of the Barsoonians, any of the humans, basically, any of the people. We never really get to meet. The only culture we sort of like become sort of familiar with is the Thargs. And that's cool. It's interesting.
Yeah.
But like, because we never get to meet any of the princess's people, we really don't give two shits about them because we don't know anything about them. You know? Like, oh, these peaceful people and they love peace and technology and that, like nothing. We get nothing about that. We just get that they're people and these are also people and they're the bad people, right?
Yeah.
The Thargs, who we meet and we realize can be like, they're quite hard, brutal people because it's a dying planet, all of that. Very cool. And then they come into play later because John Carter comes back, murders their war chief so he can assume the title of war chief so that he can take them to war. And you're like,
they make him chief because of like, for reasons,
because he beheads the other guy in a scene they presumably couldn't be bothered to shoot, so you just beheads him in about a second, and that's it.
Like Harrison Ford shooting the sword guy in Raiders. Completely just.
We just had this like quite fun, like it's very like the Clone Wars with like the big monsters in the pit.
This is the thing, the Attack of the Clones.
Yeah.
Really, just
another very bad movie. Just to be clear, Attack of the Clones is not a good movie,
but a bad movie from a decade earlier, 2002, whatever it was.
I think it's competently done. I think the CG looks a lot better in this than it did, obviously, 10 years earlier, for very obvious reasons that 10 years had elapsed. but like you get a really cool scene, and then just this perfunctory like, right, and now we're going here, and they go there, and there's some fighting, and then again the movie isn't interested in any of it. And you're like,
Sam. So the guy with the blue thing on his arms is killed, and the Mark Strong has to run away. Is that right? And so we end up with like him, Carter, because he's the only man left, becomes the leader of the planet
because he's a white man. Sam,
because he's white, exactly. Yeah.
Because also, and I bet this is from the book as well, the people on Mars are coded as red people. That's the word they use,
and
which I'm sure is a thin fucking term for Native Americans.
It totally is.
And the white people, by the way, in this movie are the Mark Strong evil villain types. They're white, and they're referred to as the white people.
Well, there he's called Matai Shang. He is Mark Strong's character also. I was looking at that going, okay, is that again? And we've got more coding in this. Lynn Collins, I think, who plays Princess, also has made unsubstantiated claims of Cherokee ancestry. So I think like they were going for something, and it's a bit uncomfortable.
No, I'm not saying the film does. I'm not saying the film does as such, although they quite intentionally cast like quite a lot of Pacific.
I think there is. I think there is. I
think a lot of this must be taken from the book, which is from 1912. Your first job when you adapt a book from 1912, take out all of the racism.
Ooh,
like obviously take half of the book, which is all racism, and throw it away.
Number one, racism. Then you get rid of the eugenics. Then you get rid of the kind of favorable mood of fascism that was started to push
then
up.
If you have time, maybe add some women and give them some agency, but only if you've got time. Because even then, also take out the Confederate backstory. But like again,
add people of
you're
color?
adapting a book.
No, you don't have the time for that.
Things.
Obviously,
you can cut things. You can cut all of this.
Yeah, but Dave, the fans of the Princess on Mars are going to be outraged if we do this.
All of these nonagenarians from a movie that came out literally 100 years.
All 12 of them.
After the book. I don't even know. Centenarians? Super Centenarians. Anyone over 100. That's the one.
There we go.
Right? They would literally have to be among the 2 or 3 oldest people in the world who have read this book when it came out and then also seen the movie. What a fucking cradle to grave for you. We haven't even mentioned, Sam, the fucking stupidest part of this movie. Stupidest part of this movie is that it is bookended and framed by a Sherlock Holmes mini story.
The end of this film, right? I watched the end of this movie.
Had you forgotten that we met this character at the beginning?
100%. It's all right. And then I'm like, so what I had to do when I literally finished this, the moment the credits came on, I was like, well, there we go, this end of that. And I went to Wikipedia and had to read a plot summary. Number one, I'm like, sorry, that's Edgar Rice Burroughs? What the fuck? Like, the Tarzan guy, okay, so that's fine. So that's the young guy in this. And then when you read...
I knew him as the Spy Kids kid.
The Spy Kids kid. So let me just read some of this. So Chang's forced to escape. Carter becomes prince, marries the princess, blah, 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 blah. He decides to stay on Mars forever, throws away his medallion, but Shang, Mark Strong, reappears and gives Carter another challenge and sending him back to Earth. Carter embarks on a long quest to find one of the medallions on Earth. After several years, he appears to die suddenly and asks for unusual funeral arrangements, blah, blah, blah. So everyone thinks, great, he's found the medallion, he's back. Then we go back to the present, the start of the movie. Burroughs goes into Carter's tomb, and then Thurn appears, raises a weapon before Carter appears to shoot Thurn in the back, and then he steals the medallion because he didn't find one in the end. And this was an entire scheme to lure one of these guys back.
It's a Sherlock Holmes mystery. That is for some reason. Again, there was a Sherlock Holmes movie that came out the year before this. That was the Robert Downey Jr. one. Like this. And I've got to think they kept this in. It's just so convoluted to be like, I've got to get back to Mars to this woman who I've known for 3 to 6 weeks tops. And like,
Days.
this is the stupidest thing, Sam, is that he has to build this elaborate tomb because this stupid mechanical thing we didn't need to have explained is that the body on Mars is a copy. So when he traveled from Earth, his body just fucking hit the ground and then lay there for weeks until he came back. And you're like, that makes no sense. Couldn't it just be magic transport? Wouldn't that make 1,000 times more sense than this?
I hadn't quite grasped that.
He gets up and all of his clothes are stiff and crusty because he's been lying there for weeks.
God, it's exhausting. And this is the problem. This is the problem with this film, is that it requires so much of you. It requires so much fucking attention, and this is why I think when Disney executives were looking at this, they were rightly going, nah. They, on the premiere, there's a I can't find the here we go, premiere. So there's the El Capitan Theatre in Hollywood, which Disney owned, had recently renovated, and they didn't use it. They put it in another theatre in LA, and so basically there was a kind of weird thing of being like, well, why haven't, if this is your big movie, you spent $350 million on this, you're not even going to put it in your main theater, like the big. And I just think Disney knew. I think the executives probably were right, and they thought, yeah, this isn't going to work. Like, this is not going to be the film for us. What we need to do is quietly and not so obviously bury it. And so what we're left with is, collateral for science fiction movies, which we can use to punt out another Star Wars movie in a few years. Like, or even the fucking other science fiction movie that we want to put out called The Avengers in just a few months. And that is a thing I just don't understand, how there isn't a point where you go, actually, should we rewrite this? Because they did loads of reshoots. And yet we're still left with all of this crap. Like this bit at the end, just cut it all. Just have him stay on Mars. And then
it's really astounding.
Have a scene where we think Mark Strong's dead, and what do we get? His finger twitches or something. Like we get a sense that this isn't the end. We hint at a sequel that might not come, but at least we have something that isn't going to just require us to do more thinking at the end of this 2-hour fucking snooze fest.
Yeah, it's amazing. I want to show you, because I briefly looked. I'm actually going to read this book. I know I'm an absolute glutton for punishment, because I'm kind of interested in how much made the film, and it's quite short. So I'm just going to present my screen because I'm going to show you because I had to go online and order this book.
Okay.
Book covers look like.
Here we go. So is this the original?
Yes. Well, it's like this has been re-released on paperback. Like,
this is the 1912 Princess on Mars is what we're gonna see. And you show me the cover. I mean, yeah, there it is.
So, like, but this isn't even the one that I saw and didn't buy. Look at this.
So we've got a scantily clad woman.
Well, in the book, look at that.
It's an actual breast. So, wow.
In the book, this is a bit of trivia. In the book, everyone's naked all the time. So, like, the princess is.
Well, you buried the lead on that, Dave. That would be something to mention.
Yep. I was hoping that I could find the one I'd seen was like a very pink, very, very like enormous tits, like very basic cartoon of a woman, and that was the whole cover. And I was like, what the fuck? But some of these like 70s and 80s covers and even earlier are like,
this is a film that really deserved to be trash 80s fantasy, didn't it? Because we get so much of that. We talked about Willow. We talked about those.
Even Dune. June.
Dune.
Dune. June. It sounds like I'm saying June, and I'm saying June.
June, the month, or what?
Even June had an 80s film adaptation, so it's really surprising that this didn't. Because you are right, all these themes would play much better. Even 60s, make it in the realms of Flash Gordon is obviously ripping this off anyway.
Mm-hmm.
Make it a Barbarella or Flash Gordon weirdly sexual 60s movie. Suddenly you've got something that might be a cult movie. I'm not saying it'd be good, but you might have a cult movie or a Conan movie or a Xenia Warrior Princess era thing. But to make it in 2012 and also for it to be so well made, apart from the plot, I think still look, but it's a very well produced film. Disney does not release shitty looking movies.
But it goes back to the original sin of this movie, which is you're basing a movie off a 1912 fucking book by Edgar Rice Burroughs.
Yeah,
you spent
$300 million. You couldn't spend 200,000 of that hiring someone to adapt it.
But he was a eugenicist. He literally was like a fucking full on not quite a but he was into the fucking cranial biology and all this mad shit, right? And so that's the original sin of this movie, isn't it? The original sin of this movie is you cannot get away from the fact that you're basing a book off this mad fucking idea.
Yeah, it's astounding. It was interesting to do the box office bomb idea, because again, I really never heard of this, and I'm a fucking arch nerd. I've read Dune.
Yeah, it's kind of infamous, isn't it? It's kind of infamous, but at the same time, there's no reason for you to. There's no reason for you.
But it came out in 2012, Sam, which was to make us sound like we're 80,000 years old, because we were born in 1912, seemingly. That was the year after we left university.
Yeah.
That was the year I read all of the Game of Thrones books that just come on TV.
Yeah.
You would think I would be exactly the sort of person who'd be like, oh my God, this cool sci-fi movie. But never heard of it because it's called John Carter.
Because the lack of marketing, Disney did their job, which was to bury this because they knew that it was shit. They knew that it was not to be.
I just think it's such a mistake to call it, to not call it Princess of Mars. I think is a fine movie title.
Or The Princess of Mars, or anything else.
Or even the Barsoom Chronicles. It's shit, but suddenly it's or the Barsoom Cycle or something. It's
I go back to my original point, which is that I really reject the idea you can blame this on the marketing, you can blame this on the title. This is a bad movie because it's a bad fucking movie that doesn't make sense, that requires far too much from you as an audience. And at the end of the day, I can get we can now in the cold light of podcasting, we can look past.
That's a great podcast name, by the way. Why don't we call our podcast
shit, I know we fucked up. We can look past so much crap, and we can look past. We've watched a lot of movies where you think, wow, this is really not going to be good, and actually ends up being really fun and engaging. We have a good time,
and it can still be bad.
And it can because there's something there. There's something there there's a little nugget of something that's interesting. There's nothing here for me. There's nothing. The CGI is all the cardinal
sins, Sam. Of I don't care what anyone's doing. They don't care what they're doing. That's somehow even worse than me not caring what they're doing. They don't care what they're doing.
I'm kind of bored.
Long. It's boring. Ross, bless him, is in a coma now.
He fell asleep 3 times.
3 times trying to watch this movie. And I can't blame him because it's just 3 times. He's literally in the ICU, Sam. There's no brain activity. He's gone.
And the man is sleep deprived from his child. However, 3 times to get through a 2.5 hour movie.
I just find it so frustrating because it's not even 2.5 hours.
It's 2 hours 12 and 10 minutes of credits.
No, 2 hours, I checked. Yeah, 2 hours and 3 is the actual runtime.
I checked. I was like, thank fuck. I saved myself 10 minutes.
I really liked how this film looked in a lot of times. I think that maybe, can you imagine if this had been even a Prince of Persia movie type thing, or with this sort of aesthetic to it, and
maybe.
I like the sword and sandals thing. I know it's been done, and I know it, especially now, it feels very trite. But like, you could have had like a fun, kind of like weird sci-fi movie here if you just kind of like taken all of the racist, eugenic-y, sexist shit from the story, put it to one side, right? Leave that to the fucking internet trolls and the people on DeviantArt, right? And then have your film be like an actual fucking story that you can tell with characters who are interesting. And because none of the actors are too bad, but this film seems to have killed everyone's career. Taylor Kitsch didn't really ever go anywhere. The princess, who's you mentioned her name earlier, like she's done very little since and has come out and spoken and said like this movie basically made it impossible for her to get a job because everyone thought she was poisoned because this movie was so bad. Yeah. And it's like, and obviously like Bryan Cranston and Mark Strong have gone on to do other stuff, but that's kind of, Willem Dafoe, because you can't see him in this movie, but it's just a real shame because like you had all this production budget, you obviously made this really good CG. The company that did the CG like fucking have never done a project anywhere near this big since because they were poisoned, even though the CG is pretty good.
Andrew Stanton is a really good writer and director. Problem is, you did all this for a 1912 movie with a Confederate hero.
Yeah, it's like adapting Mein Kampf into an action sci-fi movie.
A literal scientific racist. Like, fantastic. Good job. Well done.
Like a book written before suffrage, before civil rights. Like in some places
on the eve of the
freedom of religion.
The second worst war in
armed conflict in the history of the world. Yeah, it's astounding.
Like, this is all gold. This is the texture we want to bring to 2012, says Disney. Like,
but it can be done. You can adapt stuff from this old, like all the H.G. Wells stuff has been adapted reasonably well. Like, it's doable. You just need to fucking modernize it. And like, again, biggest thing, like cardinal rule of making a film is make a fucking film.
Yeah, well, that's
I don't give a shit if it's based on a scroll you found buried under 16 bodies in the middle of fucking Cairo. Like, make it a movie if it's going to be a movie.
And that's the Avatar effect, isn't it? I think this film was
fucking
poisoned.
Jim Cameron has so much to answer for.
He poisoned movie makers by thinking that anyone could get away with this. That you could just do this. You could just do it. It's fine. You get loads of CG and blue people.
Mildly racist movie.
And everyone will flock to it. And it'll be the biggest film until
a quite openly racist movie.
Yeah.
Sexist as well.
You can do all this, and I think that is the biggest lesson, isn't it? It's the biggest lesson.
As usual, though, Sam, fuck us. We don't know what we're talking about because Avatar: The Way of Water is now the 5th highest-grossing movie of all time, and it's been out for 2 weeks. So apparently, Jim Cameron can continue to do this without any sort of censure. He's making 500 more of these movies, but at least nobody's making any more fucking John Carter movies.
Yes. I think
also, that's a shit name for your protagonist. That's a shit name for your hero, John.
White man.
Carter. That's John Smith, the hero. He's a white guy.
There's just so much wrong. There's just so much wrong with this. And you know what? It's funny because in the list of box office bombs, which include other Disney movies like Tomorrowland, the Johnny Depp
one.
Yes, Johnny Depp Lone Ranger, which it has Johnny Depp as Native American Tonto, charming. And
Johnny Depp talking about Hollywood scumbags.
Yeah, there's the other one is Jungle Cruise as well, which is relatively. It's actually quite a fun movie. But
Jungle Cruise, did that lose money?
It did. It's on the list.
That was all right.
It was fine. It has that
picture.
It has that absolutely baffling fucking gay plot running through it. There's just like, what the fuck
gay
is
panic in 2021?
Like, seriously? Followed by, and I picked these out because these are all in, I think, the kind of like westerny adventure movies that I think are dying a death. There's Strange World, which was released recently on Disney Plus, which made a grand total of fucking nothing because it was, but actually a really cool film, really interesting. But I don't think people want this type of movie. I think we are in a glut of science fiction, of superhero movies that just are not going to let us have anything else. So I think it really signals like this was a start of those movies of audiences just saying no and deciding that this wasn't what we're gonna pay for. We're gonna pay for superheroes until the end of time. God help us.
What did I say we're gonna do next week? You
said we were going to do a Ridley Scott movie, which had Damon in it.
The
Last Duel, 2020.
The Last Duel, which from last year, which is a historical movie, which I'm not sure we've done a straight historical sort of movie.
Dave, I'm going to read you. I'm going to read you this, and I'm going to.
In theory, I have read this.
I'm going to just.
Hey, you just made me watch John Carter. I think you can sit back down, Sam.
Okay, but I just want you to understand what we're going into. The Last Duel, the true story of crime, scandal, set in medieval France. The film stars Matt Damon as a knight who challenges his former friend, played by Alan Driver, to a judicial duel after his wife, Jodie Comer, accuses Jax of raping her. The events leading up to the duel are divided into 3 distinct chapters, reflecting the contradictory perspectives of the 3 main characters. And I'm just like straight away, like, okay.
If it helps, Sam, I've told Ross no superhero movies, and he has yet to pick a box office bomb. So he's going to be swinging wild Francine with that one.
Yeah, but I think this is probably going to be a good example of it was released during or in and around the pandemic.
Yeah, COVID.
I think we have to look at the list of box office bombs like Strange World from Disney just there. I think we have to. I think we'll have to contextualize them and put a little star on the list and say came out around the pandemic. Cinemas were not really that.
You literally couldn't go to the cinema,
so we just had to dump it onto Disney Plus or whatever. Like Turning Red's another one where really, really well reviewed movie. Absolutely nowhere. It's on the list of all time box office bombs because
Disney this is why I wanted to watch Last Duel, because I was looking for less movies on the big list of box office bombs. Is like quite a lot of white guy movies, and I know obviously this is a movie about white people in medieval France. It's quite a white guy movie, but I wanted to do something more modern rather than like Shawshank's the big sort of. That's the famous. That's the best box office bomb. I wanted to do a good movie rather than John Carter, which is a bad movie.
Mm-hmm.
That movie fell because it was a bad movie. This movie fell because of COVID, and I'm certain because like it's probably quite dreary in parts. It's meant to be reasonably okay, but I'm excited to see what we think of it and how many times Ross falls asleep. We'll have like a little counter in the screen of every episode.
Yep, absolutely. Ding, ding. Maybe the dings will wake him up. Actually, that'll get us through.
Get you to the ICU with a triangle, so maybe he'll wake up.
It's a good fun list to explore, and yes, I think we could have an entire podcast just of box office bombs that would last us many episodes.
Yes, well, it's a nice thing to explore while we're. I really like getting away from. We sort of fall into this rut maybe sometimes of just like doing our favorite movies, which is fine, but then it becomes a little bit less.
Yeah, well, you guys let us do 2 superhero movies in a row in Batman and Spider-Man 3. So I didn't realize that until I edited the episodes and uploaded them.
You're only on one of them, Sam.
Yeah, but still, we're not that podcast.
We're not the Marvel podcast. I know we are. 3 white guys in our 30s, Sam.
God damn it.
Are.
Every time.
Just when you think you're out, they pull you back in.
Damn you, patriarchy.
Right, there, I think.
We'll end it there.
That's a fun episode.
Good, shouty. Like it. Right.
Oh, my throat's a bit sore, actually. I think
I know,
yeah,
yeah,
cold
I know.
going around. I really, again, had to think, what was this movie called?
A princess called John Carter. I'm pretty sure that's it.
Oh, fuck off! I don't
good job. That's fun.
fucking change my fan speed.
Right, I'm going to end the broadcast. Bye bye.